and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Lowries, and welcome back for 2022. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is, of course, brought to us by WB40 Women Beyond 40 magazine. You can check us out at wb40.com. Today in the podcast, we have a special guest. Her name is Stephanie Thompson. Stephanie is talking to us about her lived experience of birth trauma, a topic that, of course, is not discussed nearly enough and is often considered taboo. Stephanie wrote a book about her lived experience. The book is called The Day My Vagina Broke, What They Don't Tell You About Childbirth. But she is also the founder of Bravemumma, and she's a podcaster herself. Because of the nature of this topic, I will say there is a trigger warning. Some of this information may be distressing to some people, so please use your discretion before listening. We have broken this very important topic into two parts, part one and part two. Welcome, Stephanie Thompson, to the Good Girl Confessional for part one. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Stephanie. How are you?
Hi, Sandy. Thank you. I am good. I'm really good.
Well, you look great, and I've been really excited to have you on here to have a chat. How's things been?
Thank you. I've actually been really looking forward to this too. It feels like it's been a little while coming. So, things have been really, really exciting. Yeah, we're riding the waves of obviously a bit of lockdown here, there, and everywhere at the moment, but overall, it feels like we're coming back to some of our old life back. And I don't want to say normal because we kind of developed a new normal, but just for the kids to return to school, for us to be able to sit down and have this conversation without kids screaming in the background is really cool.
Yeah, that's been really lovely. And, honestly, we've kind of been recording a lot of podcasts where that's made such a huge difference to our guests because it's been a tough haul for parents with little kids at home and young children at home and teenagers at home while they're trying to juggle work and have kind of any sort of semblance of, as you say, a new normal, whatever that may be, life.
Yeah, that's so true. So true.
Well, I am super excited to talk to you today because I think what you are doing is extraordinary. So first of all, I should tell everyone that you have this amazing website. You are known as the Bravemumma, which is really lovely. I like that. And you've just, well, first of all, before I say you've just launched, because I want to talk about what you have just launched, you are the author of an incredible book called The Day My Vagina Broke. It is raw, honest, and brilliant, and it's a true account of birth trauma that you have lived through. So let's talk about that before I tell everyone about your extraordinary new podcast.
Oh,
so
bless. Yeah, sure.
Let's talk about the book first, because what an extraordinary journey. And it'd be really useful, I think, for everyone to know the background that you came from and the lead up to the pregnancy and everything else that happened. But let's talk about the book.
Sure. Let's talk about the book. So essentially, I never thought of myself as an author or a writer. Never particularly that great at English. Actually, I ran into my English teacher yesterday and he actually nearly fell off his chair that I'd become a teacher. You know, like I was a really student. I was the one who had to try and get into the classroom. Come on, Watson, you know. But he was so thrilled that I had actually then gone into teaching and had a 15-year career in education.
And then became an author.
Yeah, well, yeah. Because it all happened actually because I had a breakdown. My husband was away for work. I had two children, 2 and a 3-year-old, and they had decided to cover my kitchen floor in a box of cornflakes and an entire new jar of honey while I was on the toilet.
Ouch.
So quick. But when I came out, it was like the catalyst of, oh my God, I can't actually do this. I can't do this without my husband here. And that is in the physical sense because of the birth trauma, but also the emotional sense. And when I mean do this, I mean I would just cried. I just fell to the ground and I sat in the honey and the cornflakes and I cried and then I laughed and then I cried and I was like, I need help. This is not right. Crying and laughing with kids. The kids didn't know whether I was angry at them or if I thought it was hilarious. And so pretty much from that moment on, I thought, I've got to do something. Everything I'm doing up until this point is not helping. Burying it, pretending it didn't exist, being busy, all of that stuff. And at the same time, we were in the process of a lawsuit against the hospital where my traumatic birth occurred. And because of that, my legal team had said to me, no Facebook, no social media, just keep out of everything because we just want you to be you, you know. And so I'm like, okay, whatever that meant. So I did it, but I was on LinkedIn because LinkedIn was my professional profile. It had nothing to do with childbirth. It was education. And I just scrolled things to keep the mind active. I love being busy. And I saw that there was a post from Andrew Griffiths. He was holding an author's retreat, and it was in Bali. And he did this panning picture of the beach. And I was like, oh, geez, I want to be there. I don't want to be here with cornflakes and honey. I want to be in Bali doing whatever the hell he's doing.
And babies and toddlers and all of it.
Yeah, and I'd been to Bali before and I didn't love it. I never wanted to be an author. But guess what, Sandy? Exactly 1 week later, I landed in Bali.
Oh, Stephanie, that's brilliant. I love that.
And I showed up and I'm like, Andrew, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm really called to be here. And to convince my husband that I had to do this thing, he's like, why do you want to do that? And I just said, I can't actually tell you right now, but I promise you, I have to go. It was like, you know, when people say they just had a calling and you think, oh yeah. Righto, that's a bit, hocus pocus. Like if you don't believe in that stuff. But I'm telling you, I just was called to it. The first night after learning how to write a book, you had to actually go and start writing it. And I did. And I don't think I slept that night, but I just had fingers of just smashing the keyboard, but my eyes were just wet the entire time. I didn't realize that I was actually grieving so much loss and grief just simply by becoming a mum.
Yeah.
So the book was never meant to be anything other than, Dear Diary, this sucked, the end, and lock it away. So it was meant to just be a resolve for me personally. At some point during that week, I decided if I don't share this, that's really selfish. And if I don't share this, the same thing's going to happen to my Elsie. And I was like, no, not on my watch. Funny that it's only when you've probably lived in the birth trauma space, you hear it a lot in that realm. And so now I get to see both sides of the coin in terms of natural birth advocacy and how beautiful it can be for some women. And I think that's amazing. I just probably wish I would have known the other half of what could happen. And at the same time, I understand that we don't want to scare women, okay? Because it's already a really fearful thing for some. But I feel like we're also duping them of half of the information, because I know, and you very kindly said it's an extraordinary experience, but it's also very common now. And it's becoming more common because we are birthing much older. We are having bigger babies, and I know people will jump straight onto that and say, if you believe and you trust your body and you can breathe your baby down no matter what, because that's the belief that a lot of people do hold really close. Birthing is really emotional, right?
Absolutely. And I think, I'm so happy for women who have had a natural birth and it's been a beautiful experience, or a difficult, experience, but not traumatizing. I'm happy for women who have lived that experience. For myself personally, having survived quite an extraordinary birth trauma myself, I think it's something that, you know, and I was a very young mum, and I did say this to you off air before, I wish in a way that I had been brave enough to write my story and share that with other women. But at the time, being such a young mum, I was 21, nearly 22. And I didn't think that I had the right really to be talking to all these older mothers, you know, about my experience, which is just crazy now when I look back. So I think that you writing this book is brave, brilliant, but also extraordinarily helpful to other women on the lead up to having a baby, but also to know what could happen, but also for those that have lived this, to give them a sense that they are not alone. So tell us how the book came about, because I know we did talk about this off air just before, but it's such a fantastic story. So tell us about the lead up to going off to write a book.
Sure. Just before I do, though, I just want to say it's never too late, Sandy. I know that your birth was when you were 21, but I can tell you, and I will share with you as I go through my journey, that it's so cathartic for you. So obviously authors write for an audience, but it's also okay just to write for you as a part of what you need to do. So it's never too late.
I have written about it, Stephanie. I think all my years of writing, but definitely didn't share it. But I think it's part of a much bigger story.
Yes.
But yeah, love what you've done. So let's talk about the lead up to this, because I love this story. This is so fantastic.
I think for our followers, they might have heard it a few times, but basically, in a nutshell, it came to be that I had a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. My husband used to work away a week out of every month. And this one particular morning, I was stuck on the toilet because my birth injuries make it really hard to go to the toilet. So it's a bit of a drawn-out process. Anyway, I came out to the kitchen to find the entire kitchen floor covered in a box of cornflakes and an entire jar of honey, and my 2 toddlers laughing their head off. I couldn't laugh. All I could do was cry. I just cried because I couldn't do it. I couldn't clean it up physically. I was like, how the heck am I going to do this? And emotionally, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I think that was probably the point where I thought, well, actually, I didn't clean it up for a while. It stayed there. I sat there and I cried, and then I laughed, and then I cried, and then I laughed, and then I just reached for my phone to just bury my head in something else. I just wanted to ignore it. So the kids were happy just swimming in it. I was like, yep, bugger it. I took some photos. I took photos because that's what you do as parents. You take photos of when your kids do really crazy stuff like that to show at their 21st. But and simultaneously at the same time, we were going through a lawsuit against the hospital where this birth trauma happened. And my legal team had said to me, stay off social media. No social media. We never want any issue coming at you. I'm like, okay, sure.
And that's tough as a young mum with toddlers in the house. And, you know, that's kind of your connection in a way sometimes to the world.
Yes. So I used to play Tetris a lot. I don't... Just to keep the mind active. I think parenting is very physical and emotional, but I also love to be mentally stimulated, so I used to play Tetris. But I was still allowed to go on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn was linked to my professional career in education. So I was just doing a bit of a scroll, and then I saw this post from Andrew Griffiths, and he is an author, award-winning author, but he just happened to be in Bali, and he did this panning shot of the beach, and he said, I'm doing an author's retreat this week, come along. And I felt like he was talking to me.
Yeah,
like just me.
So like almost like a spiritual pull.
Which sounds hocus pocus, I get it. But all of a sudden I thought, well, you know what, I've been to Bali, I don't love it, I don't want to be an author, but my God, I need to be there. I have to be there. How am I going to get there? Then I spoke to my husband when he returned home that weekend, and I said, I have to go to Bali. He was like, what? Why? When? What? I said, I need to go on Thursday. He goes like, this Thursday coming? I'm like, yep. He's like, okay, how are you going to do that? I'm like, I don't know, but I'm just going to do it. So I did. I just got childcare and, you know, how do you pay for it? Oh my God, let's work that out later. Whatever. And I was on a plane and
charge it.
I arrived in Bali on the day it started, and I rocked up and walked in, and Andrew's like, I am so glad to see you. And I said, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here, but I'm just here.
Wow. And no doubt, as a young mum, 2 toddlers, probably you arrived stressed, tired, exhausted.
So guilty.
Right?
So
Yes.
guilty.
And all that mother
Guilty.
guilt.
Oh, like Sandy, I was like, how did I just leave my toddlers at home? Like, it was so hard. I thought, what mum does that? What mum uses money that you don't actually have in your young family? But I still had to be there, and it was for a reason, which I found out later on, obviously, because later that day, after day 1, you had to go home and then write. And I'm like, oh, I had to pretend I'm an author now. I have to be one. Shit. So then I just started just journaling, because it was always just going to be, you know, dear diary, this happened. It was horrible. Lock it away. I'm okay. And I could move on. But the entire night, I just wrote and I just cried the entire time. Like, I was like, oh, man. The grief and loss of having that motherhood journey to motherhood experience, and just feeling ripped off, feeling really, because at the same time we never really told anyone. I was embarrassed. Yeah. I thought I failed. I call it vaginal childbirth, because I know people love natural birth and Caesar, and they love to pit each other, and it's really political, but for me it's vaginal birth or cesarean birth. You become a mum, or even adoption, right? You're still becoming a mum. Whatever that transition is, who cares? But that's why I say I feel like the vaginal birth experience I had it blindsided me, Sandy. It blindsided someone who was educated, who went to all the birthing classes, who felt like she was a really good patient. I was really well behaved. And you feel like, and this is what you get. You're just like, oh, I failed. So I didn't tell anyone. And I particularly didn't tell anyone about the injuries that it left me with. So yes, it's one thing to have a traumatic experience. And I think it's another thing to be left with physical injuries that never leave you alone. Every single day, on repeat, I live with those injuries.
Yeah, wow. And that's why I think you writing this book is going to be so helpful to so many women, not just on the lead up to pregnancy. And as you said before, not that we want to frighten women, we don't.
No.
But this is really, your book really is about educating people that stuff can happen, and actually stuff does happen all the time. It's just not talked about very much. And we do live in a society where I find myself when I meet pregnant women or younger women going through it, and they ask me about, you know, oh, what was it like when you were pregnant? First of all, I loved being pregnant. Absolutely loved it. Loved every day of it. I'm one of those women people love to hate. Never had morning sickness, all of that stuff. But I shy away from talking about the birth experience of my first child, and I do so very deliberately because I'm so concerned about terrifying these women who are pregnant, regardless of their age, who you know, because I said younger women, but it's not always younger women. But I do tend to shy away from it because, you know, as I said, I'm very worried that they're going to walk in and go, oh my God, what if that happens to me? But in actual fact, what you're bravely doing is showing that, yes, stuff can happen, and the more prepared we are, the better we may be able to deal with it. So let's talk about your extraordinary journey on the lead up to motherhood.
Sure.
And, you know, and then the pregnancy, and then leading into the birth, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. It's always nice to know, I think the journey beforehand gives you context. And so in my early 20s, I went to my GP because I was 26, and I said, I want to have 6 kids. I want to start today. What do I do? Blah, 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 blah. And so she's prescribed, you know, kind of give me all the vitamins and everything like that. I'm like, right, I'm going to go do that. And just at the very end of that appointment, I said, oh, and by the way, I've just got this little niggling thing in my neck. It feels like a pea. I feel it when I've got my handbag on there. Just have a little look. And obviously the partner I was with at the time was an ambo, and he's like, oh man, you're such a hypochondriac. It's nothing.
Oh God.
And so instead of going in and wanting to get pregnant, I walked out pretty much within a couple of days with a cancer diagnosis.
Wow.
So Hodgkin's lymphoma is what that little pea-sized lump was, and went through that journey of chemotherapy, surgery, radiation for the next year and a bit. all I could think about that entire time was like, but when can I get pregnant? When can I have a baby? And I did all my research, and a lot of it was all about letting all the toxins exit your body for about a year afterwards. I was like, I don't want to wait that long. I was really impatient. I was like, I knew what I wanted and I wanted it now. So, you know, in life, just it really puts you on a path where you may not be able to steer the ship. You just have to go with the flow. And eventually, I think cancer exhausted that love. It was, you know, and you hear that, it's pretty common to survive a relationship, to survive a young cancer is usually not that good odds. And so it was obviously meant to be for a reason, because then I met my big love, and and we also wanted to have a baby and get married, and we did all of that, ducks in a row type thing, but then it just wasn't happening. I think it took about 5 years. And early on there was talks with some IVF clinics, and I did some procedures that kind of, in layman's terms, it flushed the system out. Went on all these multivitamins, and I was meant to go back on the Wednesday to start the IVF drugs. But on the Monday, I rang and said, hey, I'm pregnant. And the receptionist was so excited. She's like, this happens all the time. It's amazing. Yeah, congratulations. That's great. But then from then on in, and this is only something I have revealed more recently because I didn't even know it was a thing. The entire pregnancy, I loved being pregnant. I felt it. I was like, this is phenomenal. But I was really shit scared. I was scared of miscarriage the entire time. Every time I went to the toilet and I pulled my knickers down, I thought I would see blood.
Yeah.
Even if there wasn't, I was picturing it. And I think that stemmed from, well, number one, obviously trying for so long and the yearning to be a mum. And number two, when I went in to have my first blood test at my GP, the very first one after you've peed on the stick, the receptionist rang me at work and said, oh, you need to come in for an appointment urgently. And I was like, what does that mean? And she wouldn't tell me. She said, oh, sorry, the doctor has to see you. I'm like, I'm an hour away. I'm about to get in my car and rock up. You have to tell me. Anyway, so she wouldn't tell me. And I rang back and I said to my GP, you have to tell me. Like I got him on the phone because I was in a panic. I was thinking, oh, miscarriage. Yeah, I'm having a miscarriage. That's it. We're done. And he said, oh, no, you've got gestational diabetes. You're fine. It's all good. I'll talk to you when you get here tomorrow. I'm like, okay. So it was just that they picked up that I had gestational diabetes really early. Right. So it wasn't a miscarriage. But from then on in, I did worry about it the entire time. And very sadly, a girl who I worked with, who's a very, very dear friend of mine, we were pregnant at the same time, and she did miscarry. And so it was just that constant around you. Like it was just this far away. And I don't know why I have not shared that before, but I think I lived in fear my entire pregnancy.
Yeah, and I think that that's quite common. I know I had 3 miscarriages. I have 3 children. I'm very grateful for that. Right. But there was a huge gap between my first child, which was the trauma birth, and the second child. And when I did get pregnant with my daughter, I know that I walked around in that pregnancy and I was very consciously aware of it, that I was terrified the whole time. I did hemorrhage actually at 28 weeks with her. And that was so terrifying, and being at the hospital and them jabbing me with, steroids and all sorts of things. And she made it, and thank goodness. And then from there, bizarrely, we went on and had yet another child who was unexpected and brilliant, and we were so pleased. Yeah. Not that he was unexpected, we just never went, I just didn't go back on contraception. So it was like, well, if it happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But I did walk around absolutely living with this very conscious fear. And so I do think that is very, very common. And a lot of women perhaps don't recognise it in themselves, or if they do, they don't talk about it.
I did not even recognise it until now, and she's 6. I think it was just this year a conversation I was having on the podcast, and I was like, actually, I used to do that all the time. Doesn't everyone do that? And she's like, no.
No.
So I do feel like that now, with that context, setting myself up for sharing what happened in the birth and feeling like I contributed to it. Perhaps my fear did, just perhaps that fear of losing the baby was so prominent that I wasn't able to get my cervix to relax and contract, or I wasn't able to, I was forcing my headspace to breathe the baby down, but I probably was so tense everywhere else with this fear. And this is why I'm talking about it now with you, is that I want pregnant women to be able to work through fear during pregnancy. I never had that opportunity. I never was. So I would say things like, I'll give you an example. Oh, well, what's a cesarean? And I was in a natural birth advocate group, my midwifery lab practice, and the response to that would be, oh, you don't need to worry about cesarean. Forget it. That's not going to happen to you because you're going to let your vagina open like a lotus flower and that baby's going to come out because you're going to have the right playlist. You're going to have the right candles. You're going to have the dark room. You're not going to let your mum in. And they told me the script to have a vaginal birth the way that they wanted it to go for me, which is all love. Like, it's all coming from a good place. But when I was scared, I was dismissed. No one ever said, oh, hang on a minute, she's a bit scared here. We probably should refer her on to a psychologist. Let's let her talk to X, Y, and Z. Whatever that looks like. It was just like the door was slammed shut, and me trying to be a good patient, I was like, okay, I'll just pretend like nothing's wrong. Here I go.
And I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And right.
But I was dying on the inside going, holy shit. But what if she dies? And I was, that's all I could think of. And I think that I wish I addressed that more in the book. I don't think I didn't realize as I was writing it.
But I think that that's really an extraordinary thing as well, that in writing the book, which was really hugely cathartic for you and helpful for other women, that, as you say, there's still things post that writing of the book that you are coming to grips with and coming to terms with. And I think this is why what you're doing is so remarkable, that for some women there is definitely, PTSD, there's definitely trauma that lingers after childbirth for many years. And people keep reliving it, right? I didn't know that I was hanging on to the trauma of mine until 8 years later. I'm pregnant with my second child. And as I said, living in this absolutely fearful, horrendous space of all of it, not really knowing what was going to happen. It's a big thing. It's a lot for women to hang on to. So let's talk about, thankfully, your pregnancy was fantastic. It was okay. And so then you go into this beautiful birthing suite.
Yeah, and I think too, because I had that gestational diabetes diagnosis really early on, I was able to manage it, and I felt like I had autonomy and control, that if I just did the right things and ate the right food and did the right exercise and took the right blood tests, I didn't have to have medication. So I was like, okay, I can do that. And I did. And I think even we had to express colostrum at 30 weeks, and I played the music and tried to do everything, and it wasn't quite working. But by the time we got to feeling any type of labor pains, the line was, if you feel like you're going into labor, make a cake. So stay home and bake a cake. So I did. It was my uncle's birthday. I was like, okay, I'll make a cake. And I rang my husband. I said, babe, I'm making a cake. He's like, okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, you're making a cake. I better get home. And so I knew something was happening. It was way past the initial due date. I think we're 5 days over what they predicted. And I know now that the due date, they just shouldn't say it in the first place, because it puts a number in someone's head. They stick to it. It's really hard to be, oh, well, if you're 5 days over, and then everyone has an opinion about due dates and early and late, and it's a confusing time. So I made a cake, and then by that late afternoon, I was like, oh, we need to go in the hospital. It's coming. And so the bag was in the car. I was in the car a week before. We drove in, and I saw the midwife initially, and they were going to check us into this room. And then she came and she checked me. She's like, you're going home. You're 1 centimeter. No good. Come back later. I was like, oh, but I'm here now. I wanted to stay. but it wasn't advised for whatever reason. And so I went home and I laboured and I jumped on the yoga ball and did all the funny, sounds and showers and baths and things. And then I just got to the point I'm like, I can't do this anymore. So we rang my friend who was in Amber and he dropped us in. And then my midwife looked at me. She's like, oh, you're going to meet your baby tonight. You're 7 centimetres dilated. It was 11:30 at night. So here I am thinking, I'm going to have a baby in half an hour. Awesome. Super excited. And they kind of checked us into the suite, and it was like a hotel, and it was really lovely. The lights were low, and it was still really romantic. I will say that. The initial part of the birth was exactly how it was sold and told to us, that it would be lovely. Our midwife, who we trusted and loved, would be there, but she was really quiet, letting us do our thing. Jumped in the bath, and I remember at one stage I nudged my husband. I'm like, is this it? This is pretty easy. What are women whinging about? The joke's on me, I say. The joke's on me. So I don't have accurate timelines here, like as in what happened at what time, but basically it went from that lovely calm bath to the next day. So we're heading into lunchtime the next day. Feeder in stirrups. The room is full of medical staff and my midwife. And I remember the registrar, I think she came in, she said, basically, if you don't let me do this now, I'm going to have to send you for a Caesar. And then my first thoughts were, oh, I'm going to the naughty corner because I failed. Oh, no.
Wow. Isn't that awful what society has done to women?
Yes, and it's predominantly women doing it to other women.
Absolutely true.
So, and to be fair, it's probably a whole lot of patriarchal stuff behind that.
There absolutely is, believe me. But and internalized misogyny that goes on for female medical staff as well.
Correct.
Not all, by the way. There are some phenomenal medical staff, and believe me, they saved me. So, but so you're right. There are some who are very hardcore. This is the way it's going to be.
Yeah, and to be fair, I just want to be fair in that conversation because it's not one thing that I don't think led to this trauma. It was a collective of stuff. So then basically they said the baby's posterior, so she was facing the wrong way. We just need to do a slight cut, they called it. A slight cut. I was like, a cutting? What?
That sounds okay. Sounds like I can deal with that. Yeah.
But I was thinking, what are they cutting? I didn't even know what episiotomy was. And I felt, that's where I felt stupid because I was like, I don't remember that in the book. That wasn't in my meditation. No one said episiotomy. So anyway, they cut from front to back. And then they tried to use a vacuum to suck her out the day after the 4th failed attempt, which I now know. Legally, they were only allowed 2, but they went in for the 4th. They tore the scalp off Elsie's head because
good God,
it kept popping off. Mind you, in this entire experience, there was no pain medication because that was part of the natural birth advocacy plan, is that you don't need drugs because you're a woman.
God. It's to me that's almost abuse, but anyway, keep going.
A lot of women do resonate with that a lot. So then they said, well, we're just going to put these forceps in and get her out. And of course, by that stage, we thought something was wrong because why do you go from calm to room full of people and all of a sudden
frantic.
And forceps? Like, why that anyway? So I kept asking, what's wrong, and they kept saying nothing. I'm like, freaking lying, they're lying to me. So then I lost trust because I thought, if there was nothing wrong, you wouldn't be here. So anyway, forceps went in, baby was out, and she was on my chest. We think, amazing, finally. There was a moment there where I thought I was dying or I wanted to, because the pain was so intense. Then when it was over, I was in shock from the relief of the pain ending, to the point where we just looked at this baby and didn't do anything. I didn't cry. I didn't put my arms around her. I just was in shock, right?
Yeah.
And they said, oh, we just need to do some stitching, which ended up being like 2 layers of internal stitching and another 40 external stitches. Like, it was massive repair work going on down there. But by that point, I didn't care. Baby was here, and I was like, I can't believe she's here. She's alive. Oh, my God. And she was over 10 pounds off. Yeah, she was over 4 kilos.
Whoa.
So they said that's big. And I'm like, I don't know what a big baby is.
That's a big baby. Yeah.
So I do, yeah. And then pretty much it was quickly up. They got me up off the bed, into the shower. I lost an enormous amount of blood to the point where they had to put me in a wheelchair to put me in the ward. Wheeled me in, said goodnight, Irene, and I probably wasn't really seen again. Like, obviously the staff in the midwifery practice 1 came back the next day, but otherwise I didn't see them. The maternity ward, obviously you're seen regularly, but they're checking on the baby more so and whatnot. And then
you, yeah.
Not so much me, Sandy. We were sent home at 8 o'clock the very next night. They gave baby Panadol because of the contusion on her head, and it was boggy. They were worried about her having scalp and brain damage. Still sent us home, and not as much as having my blood pressure checked. They wheeled me out into the car in a wheelchair.
Oh, my God.
And that was it.
Did they check your wound?
No.
Did they? Oh, wow. Good God. Okay. So, and I'm asking all these questions because I've read the book, but a lot of people will not have read the book, right? So, yeah. But I'm still hearing you actually say it out loud, still actually blows my mind. Yeah. So you get home with this new baby. How long was it really until you realized that you had physical trauma that had happened through the birth?
So because we were part of the midwifery practice, we did have our midwife, one of the team, visit every day for 10 days it was meant to be, and I think they ended up coming for 7. Those appointments were extremely rushed. I don't mind saying and being honest about that now, but I felt like systemically they were overworked. No fault of their own, but there was just too much. And you got to think about it too, it's October. So many babies are born in October because of the festive fun season. Everyone gets funky at Christmas, New Year, and then there's so many birthdays in October. So I do know now that they were overworked, but I do think it led to what happened next for me. So I was very, very sore, and I was very raw, still trying to care. But at the same time, I was just in awe of this baby that it was just pushed aside because they kept saying it's normal part of normal birth, right? But then it got to the point where I could smell something in the pad. You know, you wear those maternity pads. I'm like, something doesn't smell right. And I could see yellow, and I was like, I think I've got an infection maybe. And I asked them to check, and they said, oh, no, it's okay. It's pretty normal. One of them said have a salt bath, and then the other one said do not have a salt bath. Oh,
wow.
So I did. I had one. But then I went to the toilet, and I'm 40 plus. I come from a generation where my vagina and vulva I never looked at them, ever. And so I thought something is not quite right. I certainly wasn't going to ask my husband to look. So I just got my camera out and just tried to see. And I took a photo, and then I looked up. I'm like, holy shit, what is that? What is that? Because in my mind, this is a new parent sleep deprivation, mind you, I thought I could see another baby's head crowning from the opening of my vagina. It was like this pink, round, baby head looking thing. And I was like, oh my God, I'm having twins, and they forgot. There's another one in there.
They missed one.
How could they do that? I mean, that's just ridiculous now, but I honestly thought that.
But it's the panic, right? And that, so what you were actually looking at was a prolapse.
It was,
right?
Yeah, significant pelvic organ prolapse where my bladder had descended and pushed on the vaginal wall. So that was the vaginal wall I was seeing. I think sometimes I've said that was my bladder, but I've since learned my anatomy that it wasn't my actual bladder. It's the vaginal wall.
collapsing basically, and your bladder sort of pushing down on that. For people who don't know, I think that's really important. And yours was extremely significant. So some women have, and I suppose they put it in stages, I guess, mild to extreme. Yours was extreme.
From 1 to 4. So they do like a staging from 1 to 4, and it can be different organs. It can be your bladder and your rectum. It can be like all the technical names. It can be your uterus. It can be even sometimes your intestines or urethra. There's so many different grades and types of prolapse, and I think even some of us women, Sandy, get confused. So if someone says, "Oh, I've got my PT said I've got a prolapse," why can't you still walk, Stephanie? Because they've probably got a stage 1, and I had a stage 3 with the extra layer of complexity of what they call bilateral avulsions. So the muscles that support all of the pelvic organs were literally torn off the bone with forceps.
Wow.
So that means that no amount of Kegels or physio to build that pelvic floor strength up is ever going to keep them up, because they're not attached to the bone. Right? And I'm doing it with my hands, but I know no one can see.
And for those that can't see, what I might do in the show notes, obviously I'm going to put all the links up to where they can follow you. But what I might actually do too is we'll find some sites and put up some links, so people who are listening but not necessarily watching your hands there with the muscles can actually get some more information, because it's quite traumatic what happened. So you've seen this, and I imagine you would have gone into shock thinking, what, A, am I having another baby? B, if not, what the hell is happening to my body?
Yeah, and C, next to that big pink bulge, all of my stitching was coming undone. I could actually see in between in my body, and that in itself was scared, because you think about it, you can't actually wipe yourself when you are torn open raw and the stitches, and all you can see is flesh. So to go to do a poo, I had to have a shower every time, and then it was wet, and then they're like, don't blow dry it with a hairdryer. But I'm like, how do you dry it? Like, you can't dry it. So we did get back on the phone to the midwife team and say, look, something's gone wrong, we need help. And the response was, you're fine, it's normal. If it's really that bad, go to the doctor. And I was like,
wow.
Okay.
Thanks for your compassion. Thanks.
Actually, she said to my husband through the door, I was in the bathroom, she said, she's fine. And I could hear her, and I yelled so loud, I'm not effing fine. Like, stop telling me I'm fine, because it was messing with my mental health.
Of course, but also to the condescension of that, of hearing her say to your husband, oh, look, she's fine, and this happens a lot as we all know as women, in any medical field, we are often not taken seriously. So we know something's going on with our bodies, but often we are not taken seriously. And when as you say, when you have very overworked, time poor midwives coming in who don't have the time to kind of deal with your one-on-one situation, it really was like a perfect storm, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. And in actual fact, though, I have seen one of them since who still believes their line that it's normal.
Wow. Okay.
So if this is normal childbirth, Sandy, then I don't know anyone who would put their hand up for it now. Right?
No. And I think this is unfortunately part of the problem, because we're not talking about prolapse, because we're not openly everywhere talking about what can happen, what are the risks of a natural childbirth. A lot of women are living with this trauma and not talking about it, not seeking medical help because they're being told it's normal. So you, I imagine, so you go and seek medical help.
I do. I just, I can't be like this. And I remember my GP, he wouldn't look at me at first because he didn't have a nurse in the clinic, because it was quite late. It was like 6 o'clock at night or something. He said, but come and see me first thing in the morning. And I said, okay. So when they did, and obviously he's been my GP for years, he looked at me, and I just remember the look on his face. It was like going from, oh, Elsie's so cute, to, oh, honey, what did they do to you?
What have they done? Yeah.
What has happened? Like, he's like, this is a mess. And so then it started sinking in what my mum and sister and auntie were all trying to tell me. This doesn't sound normal. And I was trying to convince them that it was normal because my midwife had told me that it's normal. When he had said that to me, I was like, oh, okay, what does this mean? What's going on? He had to send me to the hospital. He couldn't do anything.
Of course. And you know, no GP is equipped necessarily to deal with. We're talking infection, a massive prolapse. We're talking stitches coming apart. We're talking all the traumatic things happening to you. Plus, I imagine you were in an enormous amount of pain and discomfort.
Yes, I couldn't sit. I actually literally could not sit on my bottom at all. I was trying donut cushions and rolled up towels and half sitting like this, all still while trying to breastfeed, and then trying to lay down on my side to try and breastfeed or whatever. I couldn't get comfortable in my own skin. I couldn't do anything. I felt like really shitty, actually.
Yeah, I bet you did. Wow. So you go to the hospital.
So we met with an obstetrician there who I had met once during my pregnancy. Because of the diabetes diagnosis, the midwifery practice have to refer you to an obstetric appointment. And I've since later found out, frustratingly, that in my notes, when he saw me, he said, Stephanie must see an obstetrician a minimum of 4 more times during this pregnancy.
Wow.
Those notes were ignored by whoever, I'm not pointing fingers, but whoever was charged to care for me in that hospital ignored that advice.
Wow.
That was scripted. I've seen it in my notes. She must see blah, 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 blah. I think because it had mental health reasons and obviously talking about fear and also the diabetes. So I'd met him once before and then I went back and he was still there. And I told him what had happened and he saw it and he said, okay, we've got some options now. We can go and put you under anesthetic. We can pull it all apart and we can start again. Or I can try you on these mega doses of antibiotics. See how you go. Let's give it 2 or 3 days. No salt baths, no hair dryers. He was really, and I felt like I could trust what he was saying for 3 days at least. I'm like, I'll give it 3 days. And I think it took about 5 days for it to stop weeping. And it did eventually get better. I think it took a month for it to close.
Right.
So for that entire time, I was living with an open wound. And there was a point there, even my best friend's husband said to me, you would have been better with cesarean scar because at least you're not pooing out of your stomach. It's a really hygienic place to heal rather than having to try and go to the toilet and hose yourself off every time. So eventually, like I even stopped eating a lot because I didn't want to poo a lot because it would hurt.
You poor thing. Oh.
It was a state. I tell you, it was a state. So after seeing him, and then I only wanted to see him, I went back. I was meant to go back a week later. When I arrived, they said, that doctor in particular has resigned in protest because of this hospital. I was like, shit, am I the only one this isn't happening to? That's not right. That's not right. I thought maybe I was just unlucky. But if he has resigned because of what is happening in this hospital where I birthed my baby, something has to be done. You can't have that.
Wow. Okay. So thankfully you were getting medical help.
Yes.
But the trauma didn't just end with, taking some antibiotics, obviously. Like it's a long journey for a prolapse. And so long term, obviously you're still living with,
I am.
You're living with that trauma. Yeah. So what is the long-term outcome, and is it possible for prolapses to be, if you like, fixed? I mean, for want of a better word.
Yeah, sure. It's a very common word that a lot of women say, I just want to fix my prolapse. And that was me too. I just wanted it to be fixed so bad, so quickly, because before this I was an athlete and I had bought a jogger pram and I was going to jog down the beach with my girl and I was going to just walk the day away. And that's what my maternity leave was going to be. I couldn't even walk to my letterbox without being in pain. And so I said, right, I'm now on this mission. I'm going to go get it fixed. And they were the exact words I said. So I made an appointment with a women's health physio about 4 weeks in, I think, after birth. And then I found out it's too soon. She can't do an internal to your 6-week checkup. it's all still too raw. But I said to her, you have to see me anyway. I just want you to look at it. I just want you to tell me how to fix it. So I did. I went to the appointment and she did look externally. She's like, oh, that's quite a significant prolapse there. It looks like a cystocele, which is your bladder. There could be more to it, but you have to come back after 6 weeks. I worked with her for the next year and a half, doing a whole lot of pelvic floor physiotherapy, even including inserting like insertion stimulation to stimulate the muscles. After a good 7 months, she's like, obviously did retesting throughout, and at the end she said, you've worked really hard, but you've maybe even gone backwards. Like
there's more stuff going on here than meets the eye. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to have to refer you to a surgeon. So I have seen 3 surgeons. One who was a laparoscopic surgeon said, nope, I will not go near you because it will relapse, which means your prolapse will come back because of the avulsions. We can't attach that muscle back to the bone.
Right.
It doesn't work. It'll just come apart, and then your prolapses will be worse, potentially with some extra complications. I saw another pelvic floor physio, and they were like, no, you could maybe have surgery once you're finished, like when you're really old. In the meantime, here's a pessary, let's plug it up. Mind you, I think I've tried 7 pessaries over the years, and none of them have worked because of the avulsions as well. And then I saw the last surgeon, who was promising. He was the only one that did an hour and a half worth of testing, really methodical, like I'm on my wavelength, like not just shoving his hand up there and guessing what stage. He actually did a whole lot of scanning, 4D, 3D scanning type thing, and then gave me a proper diagnosis and said, you could be a potential candidate for surgery, but you have to be 100% finished with having kids.
Yeah, fair enough too. Yeah. Because the pressure of having another baby in your womb and pushing down on everything, of course.
Yeah, so I said, okay, and this was in October, so Elsie was just turning 1, and I said, all right, I'd never even wanted another baby. Like, we were one and done. That was enough. One traumatic birth is enough in one person's lifetime. However, we never considered Elsie. And when I went to pick her up that afternoon, she was playing at my mum's house, and I looked at her and I'm like, she might want a sibling. So I said to my husband, so basically we gave ourselves 3 months. We said by the end of this year, if it's not done, then we're going to move on, book him for that surgery, and be totally fulfilled. We had all the love in the world we needed from her. It was enough.
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine. Available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.